Hi there, welcome to Business Leadership Podcast. In this podcast, I interview successful business leaders and industry experts to help you grow your business. I truly believe that sometimes a single insight can completely change your business directions and allow you to achieve your business goals. In this episode, I interviewed Amir Ghannad. Amir is the president and a founder of the Ghannad Group. He's a successful entrepreneur, business leadership expert, and author of Transformative Leader. Amir shared insights on a concept of transformative leader and what it takes to transform organization and a culture. We talk about many different topics around the leadership and business, but I think you're really gonna enjoy my discussion when Amir talks about change management leadership versus transformation, and he also shares insight on leading by value versus leading by role and a policy. So if you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe and send us your feedback. Until next time, enjoy. Hi guys, welcome to Business Leadership Podcast. Today my guest is Amir Ghannad. Amir's been coaching, leading companies and helping business leaders to navigate the leadership. Amir, welcome to podcast. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much for having me, Gurmeet.
I'm looking forward to it. This is one of those topics, Amir, that what we've gone through for the last couple of years. Most business leaders, either we were tested, or we were just, challenged with so many different obstacles. And I think a lot of business leaders probably navigate the water and they learn something from my last 2 years and even by no choice. So I think we just coming through it, but I think that it's been challenging time for business leaders for the last couple of years. And I think they will draw a lot of value from our discussions because, you are expert in this area. So I'm looking forward to learning and hoping this audience watching us today, they can draw a lot of value from our discussion.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
So walk us through, what do you mean by transformation leaders? What's the name of the book? Transformative.
The Transformative Leader. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So if you walk us through, what's your definition of that, the leadership?
My definition of transformative leadership is really having a transformative vision, which is different than just playing whack-a-mole with your problems. We all have a lot of problems in front of us that need our attention, and it's appropriate and it's definitely necessary to kind of be in the change mode and improve things and tweak things and make things better. But transformative leaders, in addition to all of that, have a vision in mind that says, okay, this is the transformation that I want to cause. So it starts with that. But then it actually gets into a lot of other work that starts with me as a person. So if I'm a transformative leader, I'm going to first start looking at myself to say, okay, in what way am I getting in the way of progress? Right? Because everybody wants to change the world, but nobody wants to change themselves. So for me, the work that sort of inspired the book or the content of the book really had to do with my own personal experience of dealing with some tough situations professionally and having to kind of rise above it. And what really made the difference was for me to look at myself to see in what ways am I sabotaging myself, in what ways am I in the way of progress. And then once you do that work, then of course it's about recognizing that transformative leadership also requires the support of other people. So if it's something that you can do by yourself, it's not very transformative, right? I mean, so most of the transformations that have happened in the world have required the support and alignment of the people that are involved. So in that sense, then once I have a transformative vision, once I really do the work on myself, then I begin to really get in touch with what does it really take to inspire others about this vision and to get them to actually commit to make some things happen. And so those are some of the building blocks that go into transformative leadership.
How this is different than change management that most leaders are so consumed with. Especially in my industry, tech industry, change management is something that goes on in industry, and the most leaders are just so swamped with the change management compared to what you just walk us through on a transformation.
Yeah, and so change management is something that we must be good at, right? So you got to be good at managing change, leading change, adapting to change. If we don't have some mastery in dealing with change, then we're not going to survive. But it's one thing to try to survive, it's another thing to basically thrive, right? So what I always say is all transformations involve change, but
Okay.
not all change amounts to a transformation. Right.
It's true.
So yes, it's absolutely necessary for us to develop mastery in change management and change leadership. But oftentimes, as I mentioned in the book, The Transformative Leader, I say, why settle for managing change when you can lead a transformation? That doesn't mean that change management is bad. It means that it's the foundational building block and some of those skills and systems that we need to have in place. And you absolutely have to have that. But don't settle for that. Go for something bigger that transcends your immediate issues and problems.
Where do you see most business leaders get stuck when you're going through transformation or trying to change something in an organization? Where do they get stuck? Where, from your experience, especially with what we've gone through with the pandemic, where you saw some of the biggest challenges or people getting stuck when they're trying to carry this kind of transformation?
Yeah, honestly, I think sometimes some of the things that stand out for me is that sometimes we build our vision on top of our limiting beliefs that we already have. And sometimes we build our vision on top of our current situation, whereas really a transformative vision is one that you develop based on a clean sheet approach. And you might say, well, wait a minute, but we don't have a clean sheet. We have a situation in front of us, and that's our only starting point. And I accept that, and I agree with that. Okay. But in order to create a transformative vision, you got to start with a clean sheet and then take into account your starting point and go from there. So the first place that people fall short is that they begin to set their vision based on today's reality as opposed to what's really possible. That's one thing. The other thing, which you brought up the pandemic, as I've worked with my clients, I can see basically in my clients as well as other case studies that I read and other sort of people that I study, is that those companies and those people who were managing and leading by principle actually did much better coming out of this pandemic because they were able to adapt, basically use the same principles. But now that their situation and circumstances have changed, they were able to apply those principles to the current situation and still deliver results, still take care of their people and that sort of thing. By contrast, the companies or the people who managed by rules really did not do very well because all of a sudden your world has changed. Well, the old rule doesn't apply, right? So when you think about, for example, how to treat employees, right? So that we may have certain rules that says, okay, you have to have this many hours on your computer, you have to have this, and we're putting so many constraints on people as opposed to the principle that says, look, we want to get the job done, we want to make sure that you're taken care of, and so on and so forth. So again, the next sort of mistake that people make, and it has become even more clear during the pandemic, is that they try to manage by rules as opposed to lead by principles. And I guess I'll just mention one more thing, and that is that I think it's, as I mentioned before, part of transformative leadership is looking at yourself to say, okay, what is it that I am doing or I'm not doing, no matter where you are in the organization, that is getting in the way of progress? I just don't feel like there's enough of that goes on. As I work with my clients and they go through this one workshop that I do called Discover the Transformative Leader Within, as they go through that 4-hour session, they come out the other end saying, this was nothing like anything I've ever been exposed to, but it's because it's mostly introspective. I give them 7 hidden saboteurs of success and fulfillment, and then give them some habits that are corresponding to those, and let them kind of see for themselves what's holding them back from being and showing up as the transformative leader that they are already. So those are just a few things that I would mention as the top things that are getting in the way.
Wow, that is thank you. That's very interesting, and if the idea is, listen, you got to transform yourself before you can transform the organization. A lot of work needs to be done on yourself. That's a hard work. It's a lot of work. It's a hard work. I'm not sure. being a CEO, when you challenge with that kind of work you have to put in yourself, are you willing to go through that kind of transformation? I think that's what needs a lot of courage and all those personal development, but that's a lot of work before you can transform the organization. Is that challenging a lot of people? Is that you see people kind of get stuck in there that they do a little bit of that, they stop, because this is a lot of hard work where you're talking about that you gotta transform your habits, the way you approach your mindset. There's a lot of things you have to change in yourself before you can transform the company.
Yeah, I mean, it's the old story that Stephen Covey tells about the guy that was cutting the tree down, and a few hours later he comes by and he still hasn't made a lot of progress, and he suggests, well, maybe you ought to stop and sharpen the saw. And the guy says, well, I don't really have time to sharpen the saw, right? So this approach is certainly not for everyone, because everyone is not going to make the choice to do it. However, I think if we recognize that, we don't have to be at a finish line with personal development. In fact, there is no finish line. But we do need to at least get started with that, to recognize what is it about our habits, what is it about our actions, about our words, about our behavior that is holding us back. If we're not willing to do that, then yes, we're going to do our best to tell people what to do and so on and so forth. And you know what? Honestly, at some point, people will get the idea, get the point that I don't want to hear, as your leader, I don't want to hear any kind of feedback. And so they go silent. Some of them may leave because that's not the kind of place they want to work in. But others who kind of figure out that, you don't want to be told that this could be better or that could be better, then they hang around, but they become silent. And that is a very dangerous thing for any organization, in my opinion.
Well, that comes back to that productivity or the output of the company, right? So if you have a people that are disengaged, we already know that there's so many studies out there that a lot of people that work there, they're very disengaged. I think 90% people are disengaged. I was reading one of the recent study. To bring back those people and work to their potential and not the numbers that they need to deliver. If you approach it that way, that you need to be able to transform yourself so you can help people to achieve their levels of success, whatever they want to achieve the potential, right?
Well, yeah, I think it comes down to what it is that we want out of people. Honestly, it comes down to this distinction that I call compliance versus commitment. If all you want from your people is compliance, in other words, show up and do this job that I've told you to do, and don't worry about anything else, and that's all I want from you. And then I will employ all kinds of carrot and stick approaches and traditional ways to kind of whip people into shape, make them do what they're supposed to do. On the other hand, if I'm not after compliance, but I'm after commitment from them, then that takes a whole different set of interventions and behaviors and incentives. So, for instance, to get compliance out of people, the one thing that I need to do is make sure that I pay them at a competitive rate and give them benefits and so on and so forth. But that's not the kind of thing that motivates people. It may demotivate them if they don't make enough money. They may go somewhere else. It may make them unhappy. But I don't know about you, but it's like when I was working in the corporate world, I didn't go home every 2 weeks when I got my paycheck and declare to my wife that I was just so motivated because I got paid by these people. No, after a while it becomes a normal thing and all of that. So if you want commitment out of people, then you've got to create the conditions in which they offer it up for free. And all of those conditions are really generally in the form of they get formed through not just your pay and benefits, but intrinsic rewards, not extrinsic rewards. If somebody cares about me and you want me to grow and develop and you want me to be part of something big and you value my opinion and all of those things, that is what it takes to get commitment out of people.
Wow. And if you talk about compliance, first thing went out of the way during this pandemic was the compliance. how do you hold people compliance when people working from homes or decentralized locations, right? But if you're running back to your point, if you're running by the principles, definitely, and you have a commitment from people, definitely you can still move the company forward and keep that commitment level. It's a little bit more hard work, but I think those companies who were working with the commitment levels and some sort of principles, they probably perform much better over the last couple of years than company running with rules or compliance, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I think this whole illusion of having control is something that we've got to really come to grips with. In that, you may have an illusion that you are in control. You got people, you can look around, you can see them sitting at their desk and typing away or whatever else, or on their phone and conducting business. But honestly, we never had control. I mean, so trying to control people doesn't work. But creating conditions in which they bring their discretionary effort in and they want to do their best is the way to do it. But to your point, that's not easy, right? Because I always say, when it comes to leadership, when it comes to culture transformation, the hard stuff is easy, the soft stuff is hard. Because the hard stuff is like, okay, things that are seemingly tangible and things like that, and those we can do those and put a check mark on the list and say, you know what? Yeah, we got a vision statement. It's on the wall. We had a meeting. We deployed it. We got whatever, right? But the soft stuff is hard. The soft stuff, this is where I've got to really get in touch with myself, get in touch with how I communicate, get in touch with what's important to people, get to know the people, and that sort of thing. So the soft stuff, or sometimes we call them soft skills, I like to refer to them as super skills. I didn't come up with that. I heard it somewhere else, and I adopted that because it's really super skills, because it requires you to practice some amount of self-discipline and that sort of thing. So that is where it's at.
The super skills you mentioned, that definitely with the last couple of years, people gone through so much on the personal level, or financial level, or some sort of mental health, because they were all contained in an environment at home, based on what kind of home they have, right? So if they're looking at smaller homes, even worse, because they're not getting out, especially in Canada. I'm not sure it's the same where you are. People trapped in a house for two years, they can't get out, but definitely it does a big toll on their mental health as well, right? So business leaders, definitely those skills, what you just mentioned, they become so critical. Now you have to deal with somebody over the Zoom call or over the phone, and not aware of that, what other person is going through, because there's so much happening during this, in the families.
Yeah, I think, sometimes we, if somebody doesn't really care about that sort of thing and they don't really want to do it, they will find all kinds of excuses not to do it. They say, oh, it takes a lot of time. We're trying to run our business. What the heck? Am I supposed to call everybody and say, hey, how are you doing today? And all of that. So there's all kinds of ways that we can exaggerate and talk ourselves out of it. But quite honestly, I think we can all think about somebody in our career that we felt really cared about us. And in many of those cases where that person really proved themselves to be someone who cared about us, it wasn't because they were spending an hour with us every day. I mean, I had a boss who was a good boss. I knew he was a good boss and was empowering. But the one thing that he did for me that literally took 30 seconds just cemented his position as the best boss I've ever had. I just started working for a company, and 2 months later, as I was traveling between Atlanta and New Jersey, where my office was, because I was traveling all over the country, so I never moved from Atlanta. So one day, I 2 months into my assignment, I landed and I got a call saying my wife was in an accident. It was a serious accident. And my boss came into my office. He looked me in the eye. He could understand. He said, what's going on? I said, yeah, I just got a call. And he basically took over. He said, listen, here's the thing. You need to go home. I asked Carol already. Carol was my admin, to go ahead and book you a ticket. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to drive you to the airport. I mean, so he took care of everything to make sure that I was okay and I got home so I could be with my wife. And then he said, look, take the next couple of weeks, do whatever you need to do in all this. So that one situation really made a difference for me, right? And so it's not that it takes a lot of time and a lot of sacrifice. And I guarantee you that whatever sacrifice was made relative to the business, I probably paid it back multiple fold
Yeah.
because I was going out of my way for the next few years to make sure that I really brought value to that business.
He showed care at the end of the day, right? He
Right.
genuinely care about his staff, right? I think that's what it comes from, caring about your people, to build the culture. So let's talk about culture. How important is to build that culture, that the vibrating culture that you need to build in order to transform the company, Ghannad?
Yeah, so basically, as far as culture is concerned, it's like culture is everything. I mean, so the way I think about culture is that it's a culmination of all the behaviors that take place in an organization. Everything that's being done or not being done forms your culture. And so if I'm a fly on the wall, what do I see? Do I see people just talking in their own silos and not communicating across boundaries? Do I see them solving problems to root cause, or do I see them band-aiding problems and throwing it over the wall to somebody else? What do I see? Do I see collaboration and cooperation, or do I see sort of selfish acts of making sure that I keep information to myself because I want to get my promotion faster? So those are all the things that form your culture, and so every result that your organization is delivering today, like literally every result that is being delivered, whether it's your KPIs or the level of satisfaction or the attrition, the great resignation, whatever it is, every result that you're getting today is the direct outcome of your culture. In other words, it's a direct outcome of something you and others in the workplace are doing or not doing. So if you want to change the results, what do you have to do? You've got to transform your culture. And so this is, if you subscribe to this idea of transforming the culture is the sustainable way to actually shifting the results, then you've got to ask yourself, well, how do we do that? And there are a couple of different levers that I talk about. One has to do with systems and processes and policies and those kinds of things, which are very, very important to kind of signal people in the direction of behaving one way or the other. And the other lever is leadership capability at all levels of the organization, to make sure that we're not just treating people as functional experts and settling for that, but truly developing them into leaders, whether they're on the front line or they're CEO or whatever, developing them as leaders so they can make good decisions and carry out those decisions in a way that's not just good for today, but in the long term.
You mentioned a very interesting point, systems and process. This is where I see a lot of business leaders, CEOs I'm talking to, president I'm talking to. That's the biggest struggle has been for last, I would say 5-10 years, especially with what we've gone through for the last couple of years. When people were working in an office, they had a different way of measuring productivity. I think a lot of them, they're measuring that people come in 8 o'clock in the morning or they go 5. They were measuring by the time, how much time they spend in a business, right? So with people working from home, that those the time clocks, those are not available anymore, right? So, but in order for them to measure productivity, they gotta set up the companies different ways. So what can they measure? Now they can measure tasks, now they can measure activities, they can measure performance, they can manage many different things. But in order for me to measure all those things, I need to set up my companies to separate. I need to set up different systems, different processes, so I can measure the real what matters to a business instead of measuring a time clocks all day. So a lot of companies didn't have that set up the way it should have been set up. Now they're going through a lot of the challenges and trying to change a lot of systems and processes. Talk about in your experience how important it's been setting up a right system, right process to help people and the business leaders to hold people accountable so you can be all working in the same direction.
Yeah, so for me, it's about, yes, it is about accountability, but it's not so much about holding people accountable. It's about creating conditions in which people hold themselves accountable. Perfect. It's about being clear about expectations on the results and on the way that we do things and all of that. And it's about not being so prescriptive to where we kind of put the person in a box. So some of the best success stories that I've seen really have come from companies, in my own operations. I've done this many, many times, really getting very clear on what those results are that we as a whole unit, whether it's a company or a plant or office or whatever, are going to deliver, and then breaking them down to make sure that we have a very clear idea of what kind of results do we need to get at 2 or 3 levels into the organization in order to set ourselves up to get those results. Okay. And then from there, setting up a review process to where every person and every team that is responsible for a certain result does the review and analysis of what went well, what didn't go well. Do we have a gap, yes or no? And if we do, what are the action plans that we have in place to close those gaps? So in other words, this it doesn't become a top-down thing to where I'm looking down in the organization saying, hey, you didn't do this. You need to do a little bit better. You need to do a lot better. No, it's not about that. It's about doing the work on the front end to get real clear what the goals and targets are and getting clear about who owns what, and not necessarily at the individual level, because honestly, I think we sometimes, do too much of that. Yes, it's important to have individual accountability, but it's important to understand what the team is going to deliver and let the team figure out who needs to do what. Coach them in the process of figuring out who needs to do what so they can hold themselves accountable. And so those are some things that I would say really help in creating a culture of accountability.
Mm-hmm. I see that that's much a better idea than holding people accountable. You can hold the whole group and then tie whatever the outcome out of the group is tied to the company vision and mission, what they're trying to achieve. Much easier. I think it's a lot easier to coachable as well instead of just holding people accountable. I see that help you achieve your goals much faster as a company than you trying to hold people accountable and trying to take their output and align that with the business.
Yeah, I mean, that said, again, I'm not against accountability when everything else is falling apart. Let's just say, look, we've created the conditions and all this, and you have 1 or 2 people who are not really doing what they need to do, right? And in those cases, we owe it to them to be very clear with them where they stand. But even in that case, they're the ones ultimately who are going to make the decision as to whether they're going to change their behavior or not. I cannot change anybody's behavior. All I can do is sit down with them, be honest with them, let them know, look, this is going well, this is not going well, this is what's going on. And most people respond to that sort of awareness to say, oh, I didn't realize that I was missing the boat on this, and they get better. But in some cases, you may even have to impose or communicate certain consequences to the individual to let them know where they stand. Mm-hmm. And, I've had a lot of success stories where those people, I sat across the table from them, let them know where they stood, and they did a complete 180 and they did great. But I've also had situations in which people continue to make choices that weren't really in line with the mission and the vision of the organization, and we ended up parting ways. We treated them with respect and dignity, but at the end of the day, for me, being really honest with people is part of having respect for them. So I'm not going to just allow you to be mediocre when we all know you're behaving in that way. No, that's not okay with me.
Mm-hmm. So how does that align with when you're building a team? I know a lot of business leaders, business are allowed to open again, they're looking to scale up, or they're looking to grow our organization. They need to bring a lot of talent from outside. When you bring in a talent and you're trying to transform the culture and you're trying to build a company and build a team, what are some of those items you get? Technical skills are easy. We say in our business, technical skills we can teach somebody, but it's the attitude and personality and the soft, super skills what you talk about, those are hard to teach. What do you recommend? How does a business leader go about, make sure this person aligned with the values they're trying to build in a company?
Well, it all depends on whether we actually value, building the team from a culture perspective or not, right? Because we hardly ever miss on the idea that we need to have the right technical skills, right? Okay, so if you're building a team, you get very clear what is the result we need to get, what kind of technology are we dealing with here, who are the experts that we need. There's no way you're going to build a team that is responsible for building this, $5 million software or whatever, and you don't have anybody who knows how to program, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, so we always kind of pay attention to the technical skills. Okay. But the illusion that we have sometimes, again, is that a culmination of those technical skills is always going to deliver the best results. And so the way I think about it and what I talk about is that your skills and knowledge are important, but when it comes to your competitive advantage, it's not in the tool set, it's not in the skill set, it's in the mindset. And so the mindset of individuals as well as the team's ability and willingness to come together and really gel together as a team. And so assuming that we actually recognize that and we value that, I don't think it's rocket science, to be honest. Yes, you need to have somebody who knows what they're doing relative to facilitating that process, to have the team really get to know one another. And it's not always about singing Kumbaya. It's not always about going bowling together and things like that. Yes, sometimes those kind of activities help. But the way I do that with my clients is that basically I get very clear about their business objectives and what it is they're trying to deliver and that sort of thing. And then using that as a guide, kind of design an activity or series of activities for them to come together to really figure out how well they're going to work together to make those things happen. And there are a couple of tools that I use that I highly recommend. For me, it's like most of the training that I do is stuff that I've developed myself. But there are some off-the-shelf products that I use, like DISC assessments. Very, very insightful for individuals to sort of really get to know themselves and their coworkers. The other methodology that I use is the 5 behavior of cohesive teams. Okay. And this is where we do an assessment, takes 20 minutes, and then it spits out a very, very comprehensive sort of report on where the team stands today on the different behaviors. And then, we go from there to continue to build where we need to do some work.
I understand from a DISC standpoint or personality standpoint, but some of those mindset which you just talked about, Amir, is that coachable? When you take it on a staff, building your teams, can you coach some of that stuff, or is it either person has the mindset or doesn't have the mindset? How do you go about it when somebody not aligned with your values? Maybe a little bit of adjustment you can make, or maybe coach a little bit. Do take on that kind of work, or simply say, listen, I just need to, because nobody's going to bring the mindset what you're looking for from outside.
Yeah. And so for me, it's not one of those things where people can or cannot develop it. I think the question is whether they're willing to do it. And I think the problem sometimes is that if you don't go through a process by which you coach them on that type of, that methodology of really getting aligned on the values so they can make choices, then what happens is you're just you don't even know where they stand. And sometimes for months and years, people kind of are out there. They're not really supporting the mission, but they're not outwardly kind of pushing back, but they're doing damage. So the benefit of doing this kind of work is that you basically put people in a position where they have to declare one way or another. And so is it a guarantee that everybody is going to take on the mindset? No. I mean, my experience is that on any team, when you get started with this work, somewhere between 5 and 15% on average of people are just simply not going to make the choice. But the benefit of doing the work and doing the coaching is that you basically force them to either self-declare or at least give you something to go on, where you can go to them and say, look, this and this and this is not okay. And so there's no guarantee that everybody's going to adopt that mindset. But is it coachable? Yes, absolutely. If you decide that you want to be coachable, this stuff really, really works. I've seen people that I would have sworn would never change, but I gave them the benefit of the doubt and continued to work with them. And they not only turned around, but they became very, very impactful leaders because they already had a following of negative people. And when they turned around and they started focusing on the positive results and positive behaviors, they brought all of those people with them.
Very interesting. So Let's talk about communication. You mentioned that yeah, we can. The people are coachable, but how does communication play a role in that? I know definitely. A lot of responsibilities fall on a business. Leadership team. That hey, listen, you got to communicate where you at and make sure that everybody's on the same page with you, both from a staff and a leadership standpoint. How critical the role communication plays that to bring everybody on the same page and moving towards a mission and the culture you're trying to build.
Well, I put it this way, no matter how motivated people are, and no matter how much expertise they have, and no matter how great intentions they have, if they don't have the right information, they're going to make bad decisions. And so, part of communication, of course, is to make sure that people have the information that they need to make decisions. But the other part has to do with really also not just giving them information on a need to know basis, but also kind of creating the context of what's going on. Yeah. So in a world where we're inundated with information, on the flip side of sort of not communicating on the opposite end, we could also communicate too much to where people are just, inundated with emails and all that. So somewhere in between, there is a sweet spot where we've got to do the work to figure out what information people need and, that would help them, and in what form would they prefer to consume it. For me, yeah. Somebody asked me the other day in one of my workshops, they're dealing with a very similar situation that as I had in one of my assignments, where we were the worst plant in the company and we turned ourselves around to become the best. And they said, well, where do you start with communication? And I told them, I said, listen, for me, I had a 13-pronged plan. Basically, there were 13 points that, ranging from bulletin boards to suggestion boxes to weekly meetings to this thing I used to do called review preview at every Friday. Here's what went well and didn't go well. Here's what we got going on. So 13 different points. And I said the key is consistency. Sometimes what we do is we communicate some stuff and then people don't receive it or they don't act on it, and then we give up on it. But communication has got to be consistent. It's got to be something that people can count on. And so again, the responsibility is on us to do our homework to figure out what information we need to put out there and in what sort of way do we need to put it out there so that it's consumed and it's used. There's an old saying that says, the greatest misconception about communication is that it has actually occurred. Simply because you put something out there doesn't mean communication has occurred. Yeah. So we've got to pay attention to that.
Yeah, one part is, definitely we can communicate, but also are people understanding the same way you're communicating, right? So much happens in people's mind for last couple of years. You look at people, they're going through so many different challenges, no matter where they are, even though you're communicating, is that resonating with them, or are they really there, to understand, or they have some other challenges they're dealing with? How does the communication, how do you make sure that, hey, listen, this is communicated properly and people understood and they're on the same page?
Yeah, and going back to the culture piece of this, I think, yes, it's important to recognize, to really study and make sure that we know what information to give to whom in what form. But we also have to understand that we're not going to be perfect in that. So part of what we want to create in the organization is a culture in which people actually raise their hand and say, hey, you know what? I need this information. And a lot of times what happens with the cultures that we create is that people rely on their leaders to give them the right information. And when they don't get it, they don't say anything. They say, well, obviously, they make assumptions. Obviously, they didn't want me to have that information, or they don't care enough about me, or whatever.
It wasn't important
enough. They just do the best that they can with what they have, as opposed to raising their hand saying, excuse me, can I have that piece of information? Right? So we want to create a culture in which that is okay to do, and it's encouraged to do, as opposed to just sort of, hey, take whatever you get and do the best that you can.
Yeah, no, that comes back to business leadership team. So many moving parts. They gotta get the communication right, the culture right. There's so many moving parts, and that's where I think back to your earlier point that, hey, personal development or personal transformation is the only way you can get a handle on all those items, all the moving parts in a company.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is not personal transformation for me. Is not a one-time thing. It happens every single day. It's about a feedback loop that says, okay, whatever we're doing, is it working? Is it not working? If it's not working, then I've got to look at myself. What is it that I'm doing or not doing? And I've got to look at the systems and the processes and all of that. And if I'm open to that feedback loop, then I think leaders need to role model that, because it's not enough just to say, well, I have an open door policy, or you can call me anytime you got something for me. Yeah, I mean, everybody says that. Nobody says to their team, I don't ever want to hear your feedback. Nobody says, if I want your opinion, I give it to you. They don't say that, right? We all say we have an open door policy, but then do you really follow through and demonstrate actively? Do you ask people for feedback specifically? So that you can put them in that mindset that that's okay and it's encouraged.
Definitely, when you're going through that much work, there's going to be blind spots that you're not paying attention to. There's going to be, feedback is one of the item, but also somebody's done it, somebody been there, and to cover, and they can see the blind spot that, I'm trying to run a company, I can't see those blind spot. You need those support system around you. So when you are, driving that change and you're not missing anything, you're taking care of all the important stuff.
Yep. Absolutely.
And I think that's what makes sense, that people like you, you guys been, you built the companies, you've been around. So definitely the business leaders who trying to transform companies, they need somebody like you. Hey, listen, I get a lot of blinds, but I can't pay attention to everything. So somebody needs to in check, I need to be in check with, all the important stuff that I'm working on, so I can move the company forward.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like some of my favorite clients, and honestly, I don't really have any clients that I don't like working with, because either they don't bring me in or I respectfully decline. So I've got a lot of really cool clients, but the ones that are really, really effective are the ones that are actually really good with people and stuff like that, but they recognize that at times you need somebody who is outside of the organization to come in and guide the process. So, and I make it a point when I go into an organization, I'm a guide. I'm not the hero. I'm not coming in with a whole bunch of go do this, go do that. No, I come in and I partner with people within the organization who have already got really great ideas, and I give them a voice. And I think oftentimes we tend not to listen to the people who are in our organization, and then we bring a consultant, and just because we're paying them a bunch of money, we say, oh, you know what, that guy said this, let's go do that. And it's very frustrating for people. So for me, job one, when I go into an organization, is to really listen and learn very quickly who's got some ideas, and then amplify their voices and partner with them so that basically that they get a lot of value out of my involvement while I'm there, but then they don't miss me when I'm gone, right? Because the people who are in the organization are already doing some great things. So,
very interesting. So let's talk about your, how did you get involved in the leadership? I know, I read your book, very interesting book, by the way, a lot to learn from it, wealth of knowledge in it. So I enjoyed it, learning so much, by yourself and the leadership principle that you built. Talk about your background. How did you get involved in a leadership, research and start learning about how to build the companies? So if you can talk about a little bit of your background.
Sure. Happy to do that. So my educational background, academic background is I have a master's in mechanical engineering, and I started as a maintenance manager with Procter and Gamble. But very early in my career, before I read one leadership book, I just knew that I had a lot of passion for empowering people, energizing people, bringing out the best in them. So rather than try to be sharper and more, smarter than the people that reported to me, I tried to sort of energize them and empower them so that they could really be the best that they could be. So, and that's how it started many, many years ago. And since then, I stayed in manufacturing and supply chain environment for 31 years. I've done just about every leadership role in a plant, and some in a broader supply chain. However, I did all of those jobs from an angle of, empowering the organization. And later, I went and got an MBA with a, focus on organizational behavior. But it was mainly my passion for people that kept me focused on that. And then the last job that I had in the corporate world was with Campbell Soup, where it was the first time that I wasn't really doing the organizational stuff on the side. That was actually my job, that I had multiple facilities that I was working with, and I was kind of an internal consultant, if you will.
Okay.
And in 2015 rather, my daughter finally got fed up with me saying, I'm going to publish a book someday. And she basically started cracking the whip and took over the project. I had a bunch of Post-it notes and voice notes. So she basically gave me some assignments and helped me develop the outline, and we published the book, The Transformative Leader. And then a few months later, we formed the Ghannad Group, where she and I, along with her brother and my wife, so the four of us have been doing leadership development and culture transformation work. I do the work up front, if you will, with the clients, but they do everything else behind the scenes.
Wow, it's very, very, very great. It's great to have a support from a family. When you work together as a family, you get a team right there. So,
Yes.
it's a blessing to get. I never get a support from my family. My son, he's in more of a cars. I'm in more in IT. So, we're still dealing with the machines, but a different level of machines. So,
right.
But if you can get a support from family, it's a blessing to have work with a family.
Absolutely.
So, talk about your experience with the operational side on a manufacturing plant. Was there a different, unique problem that you were trying to solve as a leader there, or compared to other industries? From your thoughts, Amir, that were you faced with a very unique problems that you have to tackle some of those problems that other leaders probably don't have exposure to? They don't deal with those problems.
I wouldn't say that we're really unique, but what I would say is that, one of the benefits that you get working in a manufacturing type of environment or a people-intensive sort of industry is that you simply cannot get the job done unless you get really good at understanding people and how to empower them and energize them and all of that. So if you have a job where you are an individual contributor, you can do that without ever talking to anybody. I get that. But for me, I didn't have that option. I had, a whole lot of people reporting to me and relying on me for leadership. And, I learned through the School of Hard Knocks and all of that. But for me, the sort of the problems, if I could just kind of put it in a category, was mostly about making sure that I could bring people within the organization who felt like they had opposing goals and targets and priorities, to bring them together and show them that if we work together, 1 + 1 ends up being 3 instead of 1.5. Mm-hmm. And so that was always kind of the overarching thing. How can we come together and deliver extraordinary results? And so that, in a way, became that thing that I was always looking at. And as the old saying goes, he who is good with the hammer sees everything as a nail. Yeah. So for me, somebody else might approach that from a technical perspective. For me, my angle is organizational development, organizational empowerment, making sure that we're not just pushing everything down from the top, but like really empowering people to bring their best and experience fulfillment and deliver extraordinary results. So that was the common theme. And, I counted, a few months ago that I've been involved in about 7 different turnarounds in the years that I had in my corporate career. And every one of those taught me a lesson, and quite honestly, in many cases, they were very humbling sort of lessons. Just when you think you got it all figured out, you sort of get whacked upside the head, saying you're not really as good as you think you are. Yeah. But that's part of the journey.
Yeah. One of the complaint I hear, or one of the feedback I get, because I'm also in a technical field, we are IT company, most technical professionals, and then they promoted to, we hire technical people, they're very competent technical people, then we promote them in a leadership roles. Right. And one of the pushback I get or complaint I get is technical role is a logical role. We all taught in the schools, when you're dealing with the machines, you're dealing with the logics all the time. But when you're dealing with the people, it's all emotional. It's not logic anymore. It's all emotional, and it's a little bit messy. And people who are with the logical background, they're not used to that little bit messy. They're the one 2 + 2 is the 4. The result comes in, so it's very logical when you're doing a software development or you're doing dealing with the machines. It's all logical. It comes. Whatever the number you feed, it's going to give you the exact answer. Is it true or false? But, when you're dealing with it, it's a little bit emotional, messy, a little bit. You got to be more mindful. You got to feel first before you can deal with somebody else's emotions. Did you get this kind of challenges from your team or with yourself, when you're going through this dealing with the operations?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, and the problem that you're talking about is very universal in that most of the time people get promoted into leadership roles because of the technical expertise that they've demonstrated.
Yeah.
We all sort of start out as individual performers and the individual contributors, and then we do well and we get promoted and we have bigger responsibilities. And at some point, some of those responsibilities have to do with leading people. And the same kind of expertise that got you to that point is not going to help you succeed. And so the distinction you're talking about between logic and emotions is, I think, a good way to look at it. The way that I sort of would describe it is that, but even when it comes to people, there is a certain logic involved. Yes, you have to implement it from standpoint of really being emotionally intelligent, but at the end of the day, there's also some logic with people in that, for example, we all can relate to it at our own level. If my boss doesn't share information with me, is always telling me what to do, never listens to me, and all of that, then I'm unhappy, and I am going to perhaps do my job, but not go out of my way. And that same logic applies to everybody, right? So now if I really get that, then I say, okay, in order for me to actually create conditions in which people bring their best to work, that logic applies. But in order to understand each individual, I got to get to know them a little bit better, because it's not the same. If I have 50 computers in front of me and they run on the same software, whatever input I give to one, I get the same output. The other 49 are going to give me the same thing. With people, it's not that way.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that sometimes gets kind of annoying for people, right? They say, well, wait a minute, but it shouldn't be this way. Yeah. It should not be that way. Well, but it is. So forget about the shouldn't and embrace the idea that people are different. And just like you want people to care about you, then you ought to care about them if you want the best out of them.
Very interesting. Yeah, definitely. You got to approach each individual different. Everybody's different, going through so much. Right. You got to experience. Very interesting. Right. Any word advice? Business leaders I know. Before we go, Amir, everybody's coming out of this pandemic. Now they're looking to grow, looking to scale up. Any word of wisdom that you can share with them? That, hey, listen, this is what you got to pay attention to. I know they got to find a balance between building companies, building culture, all that stuff, and at the same time they got to grow a company to bring to the revenue levels whatever they had it before. A couple of years before. I know they're going through a lot of challenges. There's a lot of stressful time for business leaders. Any word of advice that you can share?
I would say just you've got to embrace the mindset that there's no conflict or contradiction between caring about the people and delivering business results. Right. So if you see that as two sort of forces pulling you in two different directions, that's something you want to really look at, to say, hey, you know what? That's not something that's an either or. Either I care about people or I deliver results. How can I do both? And that doesn't necessarily mean that you got to, again, spend hours and hours every day with people. It could sometimes be about being honest with them and saying, look, guys, we have this problem we don't have any solution to. And that brings the best out of people because they feel included, right? Because you're not trying to pretend like you have all the answers. So the first thing is, that contradiction. If you have that contradiction in your mind, really deal with that. I guess if I could just add one more thing, I would say look, dealing with culture is not really about fancy approaches, and it's not rocket science. It comes down to some very basic things. But if you don't have experience with culture transformation, then tap into the right resources who have done that. I mean, if you are running a particular software, you're going to go find somebody who has run that software, who's had some training in that, right? You're not going to say, well, we're all programmers, right? We can just figure this out. No, you're going to get somebody who knows what they're doing. So if you don't have experience with culture transformation, get a coach, get somebody to come in to support you, and make sure you have the right person, so they're not coming in and pushing everybody else aside and beating their chest saying, okay, I got all the answers. Get somebody who can actually coach you and guide you. Those are the two pieces of advice that I would give to your listeners.
Yeah, no, definitely. I will, recommend your book first of all. I gone through the book, very interesting. I went through, but there's so much to learn. I think your experience can reflect that. Years experience. You build those manufacturing companies. The leadership, the coaching you've been doing, it all reflects from a book. And there's so much research in a book. And I kind of enjoy every chapter as I've gone through. I'll definitely recommend all the business leaders who are watching. They should buy, get a copy of your book and go through it. So where can I find a book from your website, I guess, or is it on Amazon as well?
Yeah, it is on Amazon, but we basically would like people to go to our website, because there's also a lot of free stuff available there. I have a podcast, the Transformative Leader podcast, and I've got 300 blog posts, which are all kind of like mini ebooks and things like that. And there's all kinds of different things. So our website, the Ghannad Group, Ghannad, thegannadgroup.com, is the place to go. And from there, you'll see links to our membership community, which is called On the Court. So onthecourtleadership.com as well. So those are places where people can get a hold of the book and find out more about what we've got to offer.
Beautiful. I'm going to include those links below the video as well. People can click a button and go to website. What is the best way people want to connect with you? Just go to website, fill up the form, or there's a different way of connecting with you?
Sure. They can always contact me by dropping me a line at amir@thegannadgroup.com. So AMIR, amir@thegannadgroup.com. And I answer every email that I receive.
Beautiful. Hey, I want to thank you for your time. It was a great discussion. I learned so much from a book and from our discussion as well. I will definitely recommend business leaders, check out your website, get a copy of the book and reach out to you for discussion. Who knows, there's so many blind spots. I can never cover all the blind spots that I'm dealing with, but every business leaders, I'm sure when you have a goal is to move the company forward, there's so many blind spots that you got to pay attention to. That's where we need people like you that you can spot those blind spots and help us go forward and not trying to make those mistakes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you so much for time.
Thanks.
Okay. Hi there. Thank you so much for investing time with us and watching this video. Hope you enjoyed this discussion. For next episode, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel and send your feedback. Until next time, have yourself a great day. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.